The Cape Canaveral Planning and Zoning Board will come to order. This is September the 12th, 6 o'clock. And Renee, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Russell?
Here. Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Ms. Denny?
Here.
Ms. Gentlecore?
Here.
Dr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Stroud?
Here.
Mr. Thorpe?
Okay. All right, this is that part of the meeting where we have public participation. So if anybody in the audience wishes to speak, bring forward a speaker card, and I already have one. And I'm going to go ahead and recognize that. Peg Schaller, would you come forward and speak to the microphone there? Tell us where you live and what's your business.
I live in Cape Canaveral, Florida, 8817 North Atlantic Avenue. And I would like to hold my comments, if possible, until after I hear the review of the discussion that I'm here to hear.
And which subject?
Parking minimums.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna chew that a little bit.
Okay, it'd be
So-
okay to hold my comments until
Very good.
after that?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Anybody else? All right. That brings us down to approving the minutes of July the 12th. You have those in your pack. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, let me hear a motion for approval.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to motion to approve those minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. All right, without beating it to death, Renee, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Russell?
4.
Mr. Price?
For the motion.
Ms. Denny?
For.
Ms. Gentlecore?
For the motion.
Dr. Miller?
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud?
For the motion.
Thank you all. Now, we'll go into our ordinance review. This is a quasi judicial part of the hearing.
Real quick, Mr. Chairman, we have a board applicant interview tonight as well, as item number 2.
Thank you. I skipped that over. It was right there in the small print. We'll back up and interview a board applicant. We have tonight a board applicant. Would you come forward, please, while I'm talking? If I can find the sheet. We have tonight Daniel Sharp. And Mr. Sharp, tell us where you live, and then tell us why you'd like to be on this board.
Good evening. Thanks, board members and public staff. My name is Daniel Sharp. I live at 336 Harbor Drive here in Cape Canaveral. And I bought the house here about 3 years ago, but I grew up in the area in Merritt Island and lived here until I left for college. And since then, I've traveled the U.S. and the last 11 years I've been in the international market, consulting and developing properties and consulting in real estate. And now that I'm back, I've seen what's happening around here, and I just thought maybe some of my experience and my loyalty to the community over all the years might be of benefit. So I've got some time and I want to do some help.
Do you have a question, David?
I have a comment before the board takes over. Daniel's being very modest. He has a very strong background in real estate and development internationally. And I think he's and I hope that comes out in some of the questioning that occurs tonight. But I think he would certainly add to the board's expertise pool. So anyways, thank you for being so modest over there, Daniel.
Thank you.
Well, we'll start with Nancy. Do you have any questions?
Well, you said you looked around here and you thought you could be some help. I'm curious for somebody that's, has your experience. How do you think we're doing?
Well, it's, since I was here earlier, and after college and all, as I come back, I see that there has been a bit of cleaning up going on, because I was here in the 60s and 70s, and I do remember those times, and I think that's a progress. I think that there are some things that have occurred that are good. I think there's some things that I might be able to help with, because I think in some aspects there's been some stagnancy, to be honest with you. And I'd like to be able to maybe kick it in the rear a little bit and see if we can get some other things done.
Thank you.
Mr. Price?
I really don't have many questions for Mr. Sharp. I would just like to say that I had a chance to kind of do a little bit of research on you, and your resume is impressive. I like it.
I appreciate it.
And I think you'll be a good addition. Thank you for applying.
Thank you.
John, I did not do that research. So would you tell us what stood out to you?
Well, I mean, the fact that he's been a consultant internationally in real estate development is a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal for the city of Cape Canaveral, in that, Cape Canaveral is affected every day by the port and what the port brings in and what the port sends out and how that affects us. And I think that Mr. Sharp might be able to provide some insights there.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
Very good. And over to you, Susan.
So alls I have to say is my husband and I walk the beach every day. And I watched Danny retrofit the house on Harbor Drive, and he did it in a meticulous manner. The painting, the landscape, the pool, and all the little different variants and going on. He actually was doing a short-term rental in his home for a little while, so he knows the other side of that equation. And I'm impressed with his rework of the house, and I think he would be a good person on the board.
Okay. Dr. Miller?
In what way do you think that you could make a difference on the board?
Well, let me start with asking a question. I don't want to get in heated water here right off the bat, but where's downtown Cape Canaveral? I think I can help there.
Well, we got an overlay district that we created a few years ago, a year or two ago, in order to start creating that downtown look.
I understand that. I think that's a positive move.
Okay, anything else, Dr. Miller?
No.
How about you, Steve?
Yes, sir. What kind of projects did you work on? What kind of development?
Well, I started after I have a degree in architecture from the University of Florida. And after college, I went to San Francisco and was building houses up in the hills of Napa.
Mm-hmm.
So I started in the residential market, but then kind of floated over into the bad world of land development and started consulting for people like Aetna and others to develop internet or national projects for them. That got me into the world of retail, and I ultimately was consulting directly for Home Depot, Walmart, people like that, and became senior vice president of DeBartolo Development, who was the guy that created the malls and built Miradon Mall. And so I had the nation for DeBartolo Development. To be honest with you, I don't like developers a whole lot. So I got away from that, and that's when I went overseas. My wife and I, she's a kindergarten teacher, and we just decided to jump. The first place we jumped was United Arab Emirates, and went to Al Ain out in the desert, and I ended up, I don't know how, but being the vice chairman of a rugby club and building a restaurant and a tiki bar and things like that for them. We ultimately moved over to Abu Dhabi, and I was created a commercial division for a British real estate company, and was doing leasing with the sheikhs. There's 7 of them, and they own everything. So that was a pretty interesting experience. When the oil crashed a while back, their money crashed too. So there was nothing going on. So I went to, we looked around and ended up in Hanoi, Vietnam. So the last 6 years we were in Hanoi, Vietnam. My wife was teaching. I thought I was going to relax a little bit, but the international school that she worked for, they were growing really fast. The international school market is an interesting field. They have a lot of money and they do great things, but they didn't know how to build schools. And they asked me if I would come on and build them a new school, a middle and high school. So I took a team, created the team of 8 different countries, developer out of China and a Japanese contractor, and put together the team and developed a 100,000 square foot, 5-story high school in Hanoi. And it was first one on time and on budget in the country. So that was my last big project. I'm not sure how much easier this house over 336 was, because I did all the landscaping. But that was the last big project I did.
I would imagine that the codes were a little bit easier there working over there than you might find over here.
Flip-flops and bamboo.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
There's a lot of that, but that's what the problem was. They had tried to build in the way that they do over there. I said, I'm not gonna get off the couch unless you let me run it. I hired a $15 billion company out of Japan to build it. So at 7 in the morning, they were doing exercises to music, and they were like this. So it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to build it. I met some people internationally that are friends to this day. A remarkable group of people from China to Bangalore, India, was one of my designers, to Australia, Thailand, put the team together, and they're all a good group of people.
And that sounds fantastic. I sure appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. That answered the question I was going to ask. I was going to ask you to share some of your experiences. You've done that. I don't have any more questions. Are there any other questions before we ask for a motion to approve or disapprove? Okay, let me hear a motion to recommend approval of this application to the council.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for approval, Mr. Sharp, to be accepted as a member of the Planning and Zoning Board.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you. Okay, any further comments? Then, Renee, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Russell,
For the motion.
Mr. Price,
For the motion.
Ms. Denny,
For the motion.
Ms. Gentlecore,
For the motion?
Dr. Miller,
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud.
For the motion.
Okay, thank you all. This motion will go up to the council and they'll act on it, so you'll hear more later.
Great. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for
you.
coming to see us.
Okay. Have a good night.
Okay. Yeah, making sure that I'm in the right order here. I think the next order of business is a quasi-judicial public hearing. Is anyone willing to, do we need to swear people in for this, Anthony?
The first item is item number 3.
Yeah.
That's a consideration of an ordinance. That is not Quasi judicial matter, so on item 3, no, there's no swearing in necessary.
Okay,
It's board discussion regarding the draft ordinance, plus public comment regarding the ordinance.
no swearing in for that either.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Then let's go ahead and have the staff take us over that ordinance at a 3,000-foot level and tell us what's in it, and we'll talk about it.
All right, good evening, guys. This is the ordinance for the mixed-use future land use category. It's ordinance 10-2023. We've gone over this a couple times, and it's really not any different than it was at our last meeting. But we've crossed our T's and dotted our I's, and are ready to have this recommendation for council. I do have some slides similar to the ones I used last time, just to go over some of the basics. Renee, if you could go to the next slide. You can go to the next one, it's very basic. So just some of the basic requirements, 7 net developable acres, no more than 75% of any one land use will dominate the project, 65-foot height limit. There's a base density of up to 15 units per acre that can go up to 30 units per acre at the discretion of council, and if they meet a pretty comprehensive list of criteria. And then it has to have primary access or be adjacent to A1A Center Street or West Central, and then in the A1A Economic Overlay District. Next slide, please.
Okay. And the smallest property would be 7 acres?
Yeah, 7 acres. So for these projects, we have, the minimum size is 7 acres. We do also have some language in there that would allow for live-work sort of units in commercial and industrial zoning districts, and I think that's close to what people think of when they think of, residential above commercial, 2-story, that sort of thing. So we do allow for that, but as far as these larger projects, we're looking for more extensive projects, larger ones that are, going to be on these larger streets and going to have a bigger impact. So.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Go ahead.
You talk about height limit, developable height limit of 65 feet. Is that consistent with the hotels? And
Currently, the limit is 65 feet, and it can go higher with city council approval.
Setbacks.
But, yeah, we've never had anyone apply for that, and have discussed taking that to 65 because there doesn't seem to be much interest in that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And then this is a kind of cool feature. It's the additional public hearing requirements. We want to make sure these are really high quality projects. So we ask for pretty extensive submittal package with elevation designs, the list of proposed land uses. And so this is going to be reviewed at a public meeting. So before they even get their foot really in the door, we want to have a public meeting for a chance to talk about it and get the project, the vision of the project together, and let there be a chance for public input from the beginning. And then the applicant will negotiate a draft development agreement, and there will be at least one publicly noticed community workshop to inform the public, and that will have these concept plans. It will be, so the workshop, this is a separate meeting than the first one, but this will be also before City Council, and sort of a similar thing, just trying to get it nailed down.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I think the intent here is just because of the nature of mixed-use projects and the scope of them, it's going to be really important for the city to facilitate a lot of public involvement from beginning, even before the beginning, to when it's approved. And you'll see that the ordinance is really going to be demanding that. There'll be an opportunity even before the application is submitted to the city council or to this board for action. The applicant will have to hold a public hearing with the community to introduce the project and to get some initial feedback before we even get into negotiating the development agreement, which is a subsequent step. So we feel really good about that. We currently don't do anything like this. But just due to the nature of the projects, I think it's really important for the community to be involved and to be in every step. So that's really what we're getting at here.
Okay, nothing wrong with public involvement. And looks like you've outlined the mechanisms for public involvement pretty well. I do have a question about Objective 18B, and it's on page 8 of 11 of the ordinance packet. And it'll be line item 288.
What page is that, Mr. Chair?
I'm looking at the bottom of page 8 of 11 of the ordinance. Looks like this, with all the underlines on it.
Can
Okay.
you actually go to the next slide too, because I think this is what he's going to be talking about.
And so let's dig under that a little bit. Council may adopt land development regulations to allow live-work units or live-work spaces in commercial and industrial zoning districts, which allow a building or spaces within a building to be used jointly for commercial and residential purposes. Says these live-work units are a secondary, they're secondary to the main objective of the development. Why wouldn't they be complementary, not secondary? Secondary means, okay, we might let you have it if we think it's good, but we're not really focused on that. And one of the main focuses of putting this together was to allow live-work units as a main focus of our overlay district. And I just don't like seeing it referred to as secondary.
Right. Yeah, so these are for those smaller projects that I was talking about. So this will be on, units, parcels that are, an acre or less a lot of times. And typically those are already built out and, have commercial uses. And this would just kind of allow them to build that residential on top. I think complementary is another good way of putting it. I don't think it's necessarily.
I think what we're trying to do here is recognize that these are commercial and industrial properties. And so the accessory is, what is the currently worded?
It's secondary or
Secondary,
accessory.
yeah. So I don't think we want to give the impression that the residential use is the primary use or the principal use in a commercial or an industrial, commercial or industrial piece of property. It's complementary to or accessory to. So, as an example, I love to think about examples, and a perfect example would be the gym there on North Atlantic, just north of Cumberland Farms, that building that the gym was in. If you've ever been in that building, it's really cool, and there's a lot of space in there, and the previous owner was interested in putting in an apartment or a residence for herself. And it just wasn't allowed by the code. We didn't allow for those kind of things, and it's zoned commercial. So anyways, that's an example. Can we change that language? If the board would like to do that this evening, of course we could, unless Anthony has any heartburn over that. But
well, look, somebody may come to us and want to build a building like you've got displayed here, and it might be even higher than what you see there.
Mm-hmm.
Put back the, I don't know, maybe the first slide with the, go back one more, that one. Now look at all that residential above there.
Mm-hmm.
That's not secondary.
Well, that may not all be residential either, is that correct? It might be offices.
Could be office in there. But remember now, the mixed-use language says you can't have more than 75% of any one use. So there's going to be, that's going to kind of dictate the mix of use. But I don't want to get caught up on a single word, So if the board feels like that we can discuss it, we can. Again, I want to get Anthony's thoughts on that, if you've got some comments on it.
Well, while Anthony is formulating his comment, if you look at these pictures, and that's sort of what we had in mind for the long view.
Yep.
There's a lot more than 50% residential and living and office above the store.
Agreed, but I want to get back to the point where we're only going to be allowing these live-work units in commercial and industrial zoned property. So we've got to keep that in mind, that a residential use is we're going to have to look at it as kind of secondary or accessory to the primary commercial or industrial use. I don't know. Anthony, any further comments?
I think we talked about it briefly at the first meeting, and Dave, I think your comments are valid. What you're seeing on the screen could be just a mixed-use project, right? That would fall under 1.8A. This live-work space is intended, as Dave indicated, just to apply to commercial and industrial zoning districts where residential is not currently allowed by code. If you recall, the city had a history of granting special exceptions for principal residential uses for years, which reduced the amount of commercial and industrial space, and the council, repealed that special exception provision. So this live workspace is only intended to apply to a singular building where there's an opportunity to take this commercial space which will be the principal use and allow residential. Right, the focus of this provision is on primarily commercial with then a secondary residential. That doesn't mean that the residential is less space, doesn't mean it's inferior. All of those details are going to be worked out in land development regulations because 1.8.b authorizes by comp plan the city to adopt land development regulations to lay out the specifics of how this is going to be implemented. Currently, under the comprehensive plan, residential is not authorized in commercial or industrial districts, so you can't even proceed with a land development regulation today because you could run into an inconsistency argument if you're trying to let live-work units operate currently in the commercial and industrial area. So there's a lot more work to follow if this comp plan amendment gets approved to actually do the land development regulations to add specificity.
Yeah,
Wait a minute.
One more comment, Mr. Chairman. The photos that we're looking at now, the pictures on the slide, those are more, in my mind, those are more of the larger mixed-use projects, the ones that we'll be processing under the 7-acre language. I think the live-work language is more for smaller pieces of property with, say, like a single commercial building on it, and somebody wants to put a bedroom in it to, a place to live. So the picture, I wouldn't lose focus too much on the picture that you're looking at now. Again, I think that's under more of the mixed-use language. I don't think that's really what we're talking about here for live-work.
Well, one of the things we're trying to do around town is to reduce emissions, reduce carbon traffic. And the way you can do that is put the customer base downtown with the business.
Yes, sir. Agreed.
So if you make the residential an equal or could be a majority part of a development, it ain't secondary or complement or accessory. But one of the main goals is to put our customer base downtown so people can walk to the amenities. And what I'm seeing here is, well, maybe it'll get in, maybe it won't.
Well, I think that the project that you're describing would be undertaken by the with the mixed-use language in our proposed, or what you're looking at this evening. The smaller, I'll call them one-off projects, a 10,000-foot parcel with a building on it. That's more of the live-work kind of scenario. Now, live-work will be occurring in the big mixed-use projects. I'm sure that will be happening as well. But that wasn't the intent of policy 1.8B. But again, in order for us to keep moving forward, if the board would like to tweak some language, we're certainly open to that. But I hear you, Lamar. I'm not sure. I think we'll be okay. As Anthony said, we're going to have to. The next step is to go start drafting up some land development regulations for our zoning ordinance. So we're going to have. That's where we're really going to start fleshing this out.
Well, I agree with what you say, but I'm seeing this language here. It's just a leading edge of our governing documents.
Mm-hmm.
And the leading indicator is that, well, maybe residential will get mixed into this if we allow it, but not necessarily. I mean, that's just a feeling I get.
Okay.
Okay, fine, I've had my say.
If you want to change that language, like Dave suggested, and use some general language like the residential use of the space must be complementary to the primary commercial use, then, I mean, I'm fine with that language.
Well, when you say complimentary, you got the people living over the store, and they may not have anything to do with the business. They just happen to live up there. Is
Well,
that complimentary?
then it's not live work. Then you got an apartment complex above a business. I mean, the live work provision was intended to allow someone that, has an opportunity to live where they work. The residential on the second, the customary or traditional residential on the second floor, and the business on the first floor. That's what this provision was intended to do, was to authorize the city to adopt land development regulations to allow that to happen. Because the city has, very traditional, fixed commercial designations and residential designations and industrial designations. This section is only intended to apply to those designations. The bigger picture, which basically is what I think kind of the vision you're seeing on the screen, is in the new mixed use, future land use category that's being proposed. So if somebody wants to do this big mixed use project, there's an opportunity for that property owner to apply for a comprehensive plan amendment to change the future land use designation to mixed use, and then get a new mixed use zoning district designation placed on it. And then they will be able to really be creative and do the downtown type environment that you're referencing, Mr. Chairman. So there's a couple of things going on in this proposed comprehensive plan amendment. 1.8.B was just intended to allow an additional residential opportunity for your fixed commercial, industrial zoning designations.
We deal with this on a weekly basis. Business owners. Matter of fact, we've got one in the audience here. Peg, her building. There were some residences up on the second floor above the bar, above Ellie Mae's bar. Mm-hmm. There were people living in it, I mean, those are the kind of situations that we're trying to address with this live work language. Mm-hmm. More of the small scale residential commercial mix.
All good comments. Let's take a look at Cocoa, downtown Cocoa. Once upon a time, it was a dead place. I've been in Brevard County every year of my life since 1956, because my kinfolks had some businesses here. We would come down to visit. I saw it all grow. So Cocoa, Main Street, dead, blighted. Then what happened? They put a condominium to the south of it. I forgot its name. And then they put another condominium to the north of it, Whitley Marina. Huge complex. Bang, they established the customer base for downtown Cocoa, and that's why it thrives today. Downtown Cocoa is filled with all the people from those condos who walk in the evening, shop, go to dinner, and all that stuff. And if that's what we're trying to create here, maybe not exactly like Cocoa, but a Cape Canaveral version, then we want to encourage living and working downtown, living there, people living there, not just live work, but people actually live there. They might live there and not even work downstairs. That's their living quarters. I just don't see, well, you alluded to mixed-use projects. So what we're doing now is driving the developer to go and do a rezoning. We're driving to a rezoning procedure, and that ain't easy. It's laborious. Takes some work, takes some documents. I thought the overlay district allowed all that without rezoning. But, okay, that's just me. Correct my thinking. Why do we need to rezone for a mixed-use project for downtown and the overlay district?
Why do you have to do that? I mean, generally, rezonings are to facilitate public involvement, public hearings, i.e. public hearings, in front of this board as well as two in front of the city council. I sound like a broken record, but due to the nature of mixed use, their scope and their scale, in the potential offsite impacts, I think it's really critical to require these developers to basically prove themselves and to show and to demonstrate what they're doing for the community and to educate the public. I think you show some residents of Cape Canaveral these pictures right here, and they're gonna, I don't know what the reaction would be, but this will be an opportunity for folks to understand what's being built. And
So we created the overlay district for mixed use.
well, that's one of the reasons it was created, yes.
Well, what were the other reasons? Mixed use was the main reason in my involvement during all those years and during that time. We had some pretty good debates about the overlay and what it allowed. And what it allowed was mixed use, so we could mix up the customer base with the businesses so they wouldn't have to drive so far.
Well, I think I agree with you. I think that was one of the main intents behind the mixed-use language.
But we've already laid it out as mixed use in the overlay district. Why do we got to rezone again?
Because it may have language in the overlay district, but there's no specific language in our comprehensive plan that authorizes it. What we're doing now is we're kind of backfilling that more policy aspirational language that we have in the overlay district. What we're doing now is putting the meat on the bones and saying, this is how this is going to happen. This is how it's going to work. So we're giving more detail to it. And the first step to do that is this language that you have in front of you this evening, is to create a new land use district in the comprehensive plan that allows for mixed use. That's what we're doing this evening. The next step will be to draft some zoning regulations, some land development regulations to further put more meat on the bone and spell all these processes out in standards. So this is really just kind of the first of several steps tonight. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, Lamar, but I don't feel, and I think Anthony would agree that the language in the overlay district may not go far enough to allow exactly what we think we want.
Well, we're on a journey, and we're going to drive down the journey and do things and change things. So, and I appreciate that. But here's where we are today. Thank you for your comments, Anthony. I appreciate your.
But I'd like to make one other comment, Mr. Chairman. keep in mind that the current comprehensive plan directs the city to establish a mixed-use designation. And that provision has been in the comprehensive plan for more than a decade.
And we're finally getting there.
We're finally getting that. That's the reason why this ordinance is being presented, and it's to open up the door for a true mixed-use land use category where you can develop a town center appropriately without, I know we have an overlay district, but the overlay district also relies on the traditional C1, C2, and M1 zoning designation. Those are the underlying designations, the overlays on top of that. The overlay district has issues, and in my view, legally does not even support what you see on this screen for a mixed-use development. There's a reason why that directive was placed in the comprehensive plan years ago, and it was to facilitate projects that you kind of see on the screen to make it possible. So,
So we didn't see the facilitation moving fast enough for mixed use. And that's why we created the overlay, was to set the table and encourage people to come forward with mixed use projects to put in the overlay district.
and they could, and they can rely on, this property that's zoned C1 could have the commercial uses, property that's zoned residential could have the residential uses, and I guess you could cobble together, a mixed-use project that way. The overlay district can't authorize something that's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. That's not allowed under Florida law.
Wait, why is the overlay district inconsistent with the comprehensive
I
plan?
said the overlay district cannot authorize something that's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. That's what I said.
Okay, so does it?
We're not saying that.
I don't see any conflict yet.
I agree. What I'm saying is what you see on the screen, your traditional, like this mixed-use project, you could very easily run into conflicts with the comprehensive plan in the overlay zoning district. If you have a mixed-use future land use designation that is tailor-made for a mixed-use project, it authorizes much more flexibility to design and construct a mixed-use project. Because it's intentional, the mixed-use future land use designation is intentionally written in a way to allow that maximum flexibility to have a mix of a variety of uses without having to worry about your traditional C1 regulation, underlying C1 regulations, your traditional C2 or industrial designation.
So in my mind, all along, I envisioned that the overlay district trumped the traditional C1, R1, R2 districting. So if you came forward with something to put in the overlay district, and it was a mixed-use project, it automatically trumped the, whether or not you were in C1, C2, or whatever.
But it doesn't trump the comprehensive plan requirements.
Yeah, we gotta obey the law, but the comprehensive plan requirement does not preclude the overlay district working that way.
The comprehensive plan does not authorize residential uses in commercial and industrial future land use designation properties. It doesn't.
Okay, so, and what we come down to is, in operating this overlay district and crafting these regulations, we're finding a way to allow a mixed-use project to fit in or it's a process for a mixed-use project to come along and fit in. But you have to change some zoning.
Yeah. We have to create a new mixed-use designation, which is what we're doing this evening.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
See, the comprehensive plan does not I'm gonna say it another
doesn't
way,
automatically
and I'm gonna
authorize.
beat it to death. The comprehensive plan does not authorize dwelling units on properties that have a future land use designation of commercial or industrial, or public recreation. It only authorizes dwelling units in low-density residential, R1 future land use property, R2, and R3. If this ordinance passes, you will now authorize a combination of residential units in commercial and other mixed uses in a property with a mixed-use future land use designation. In addition, the comprehensive plan would authorize live workspace in a commercial and industrial future land use designated property. So now you have a comprehensive plan that authorizes dwelling units in places with certain future land use designations that don't have that authorization today.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah, it's tricky, to me anyway. I guess I'm saddled with a lot of history on this thing, because I had a preconceived notion about how it was going to work. And now we're coming along and putting, as you said, meat on the bones. And the legalities are not quite what I had in mind, but I can live with it. I can live with it. I just needed to learn more. And this whole thing has been, as I said, when we enacted that overlay district regulation that night, we better keep our eyes open and walk carefully, because this is going to be not easy. It's not. We've got a lot of, well, okay. I beat that horse to death, I'll quit. The Comanches say when the horse is dead, it's good to dismount. So, anything else? Does anybody have anything else to say about this ordinance? All right. Then I guess we're to the point where we're ready to recommend this thing to the council. And we're going to drive it down the road and see how we do with it.
Yes.
Do you want to modify 1.8.b?
Well,
Secondary and
I
accessory.
didn't have any language in mind, so I'm not ready to do that tonight. Is there a way we can get a second bite at the apple and come back and modify some of this language at a later time? We got to craft it tonight. Well, let's craft it tonight. It's just one thing. Secondary or accessory to the primary use. I think that should be changed to complementary. It just connotes a less inferior status of the structuring.
Okay.
It's line 291.
Okay, so we can strike secondary or accessory and use the word complementary.
Well, that makes me happier.
Okay. So then all the details later, if this gets passed, then, this board will have a hand in making the land development regulations, recommendation to the council to implement whatever consistent with this provision.
Okay. Okay, so we've changed secondary or accessory to complementary. A hard struggle to change one word. I think we probably made that into more than it was, but okay. I just don't want to drive the developers. We've struggled hard to set the table. Open this up, overlay district. We opened it up. Now we're going to do things differently. But now we're putting the meat on the bones, and I'm afraid we're going to put too much regulatory stifling in the process. That's my fear. Anyway,
We don't want to do that.
so we changed secondary to complementary, and I'm okay, and we can move on. Any other changes, any other heartaches, belly aches? Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I just want to echo what you're saying there. I don't want to make this unpalatable to a developer. I don't want somebody backing away from us because we've got all this language in here.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you've said and put out there.
Okay, so we're going to try this out. We're going to drive it around and see if it works, and if it doesn't, we'll try something else. Okay. Well, can I hear a recommendation to, or a motion to recommend this to council with the one change?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommend approval to the council of this ordinance with the recommended changes.
As amended, yeah. Okay,
I second the motion.
thank you. Renee, would you call the roll?
Call a public hearing on
Call the
the
vote.
Mr. Chairman, just need to open it up to the public before you call the roll. I don't think we did.
Okay.
I may have
Thank
missed
you.
it.
All right, so we're where we are, and we're now ready to listen to anybody in the public. Come forward, David, and I'm going to ask you to fill out a speaker card later, not now.
I just want to make a couple observations. I think this is moving in the right direction, but there needs to be an understanding of what is actually going to happen. Who's going to be drawn to this because of these changes? That's really what we're doing, is trying to do something that's going to bring people in here to do the things that haven't happened for years.
Exactly, that was the
So-
whole point of the overlay district.
Exactly, but there's a reality to your comment earlier of what happened to Cocoa. It's exactly what happened, but there's a dynamic to that and the density and the amount of people that they were able to get into the residential zone close enough in proximity to the retail that was going to blossom. The problem you have here is that because of the height restrictions and other code restrictions, you're not really going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to get a developer in here that says, I want to do this, but they're holding my hands behind my back because they want me to do these residential to vitalize it, but there's not the right proportion for me to come in as a developer, put retail in here, put entertainment, put the arts in here.
And mix enough residential in with it. We don't have the luxury of putting it in over here and over here. We got to mix it in.
It needs to be mixed in, but it needs to be mixed in on the specific properties that are susceptible to that within the overlay district.
Well, I
If you
think
put it
that,
into the area where we're trying to create something sort of like that or a downtown, a developer's not gonna go put a lot of residential in there because he's not gonna make any money. So he's gonna come in and he's gonna wanna maximize his dollar with retail, restaurants, bars and entertainment, and the arts.
but if he
Now-
doesn't have a customer base, it's for nothing.
That's what the whole city's for, and the other parts of the overlay district where you have lower scale. People drive from the port to Cocoa Beach because they don't see anything along the side of the road that is arts, entertainment, and we have the opportunity in this mixed use due to the residential mix to bring in the arts. That is go to St. Petersburg and most other communities around that have brought themselves back around. It's the people in the art community, the culture, that will go along here and take a couple of these smaller little commercial areas that allow them to put that art studio in now and live above. And once a couple of those come in, then you're gonna start seeing that lining up this road here. Then you're gonna see people stopping and going in, going, oh, well, I heard they have a big little downtown area over here now. Let's go there. That's what's gonna bring the bigger money in. The rest of it's gonna be dispersed throughout the other parts of the overlay district where you do the mix, and you're gonna get that residential in here, but you've gotta have a draw for it. Those are just my observations of what have occurred in the areas that I've developed in retail and brought old towns around to become something that's vibrant and walkable. This is not a big area. So a lot of what's gonna happen to carry those retail larger areas that don't have maybe too much residential, they're gonna be walking from the community over to that, if we do that right. So there's a lot of little elements to this that you've got to look at and put in the right places and parts to draw a developer in here. And I guess that's just an observation. And I hope that this keeps pushing through, because this is the kind of thing we need to do. And once you start putting the meat on the bones and doing it the right way, things are gonna happen. People are watching this. And they're just hoping that we do those sort of things, because once the 30-30 plan down at the port starts, if we haven't done something here, they're gonna ride by even faster. So we wanna get these implemented now to be able to get that base set, get people interested, get the arts and culture in here, get the retail, and get some better mixed use living.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. And don't forget your card. Okay, I appreciate the staff work. You guys did a great job putting this ordinance together. Thank you. And thank you, Anthony, for your clarifying teaching and coaching and all that other.
All right.
Okay, are we the point where we can hear more? Let's hear any more public input. Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, then that brings us to the point where we close the public input. And now we're down to the point of voting to recommend it. Is that right, Anthony?
Yes,
Okay,
there was a motion that was seconded.
and
so-
we have a motion and a second. So Renee, would you call the roll?
Mr. Russell?
For the motion.
Mr. Price?
For the motion.
Ms. Denny?
For the motion.
Ms. Gentilcore?
For the motion.
Dr. Miller?
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud?
For the motion.
This brings us to the next agenda item, which is a discussion of the potential alternatives for current parking requirements for restaurants, bars specified in section 110-491. And I'll just, I already gave a heads up to the staff that we wanted to ask them to take us through those parking models. Or matter of fact, let's just go to the document package with the yellow highlighting that shows what happened to everybody, every other places that we surveyed in around the state.
Can we have,
Yeah, we're going to go to that.
okay, all right.
In fact, we ought to go there first, I guess, or we can talk about what happened, and I had a couple of questions about Fairfax County and Dunedin, what happened to there. How do you want to do it? You want to do the model first, or talk about the,
I'd just like
go ahead.
Mr. Dickey to kind of give us an introduction to this and lead us into it.
I can.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
But I did the spreadsheet, so.
Yeah.
So this is one we also spoke about in July
Uh-huh.
and kind of went around, and I don't think we ever really settled on what we wanted to do. So bringing it back and seeing what this board wants to recommend, whether, you want to keep it the way it is, whether you want to do how other cities do it, as shown on these spreadsheets, or, if you have any other creative ideas.
Well, this gets us in a position to say, the council told us to go do this without, we asked for a consultant to do the survey work and come forward with ideas. and they recommended we do it with our staff. Okay, fine. Staff did great. We've gathered the ideas. We've looked in other places. We can say we looked in other places. And I guess before Kyle takes us through the model over here, in Dunedin, they went in, they used this idea of bike racks. And the more bike racks you have, the more free parking you get, which is an interesting idea. And it looks like something that, what's the place that used to be Dottie's, Daisy May, Ellie Mae?
Ellie Mays.
Ellie Mae has sort of already implemented that. Don't they have a bike rack?
Peg, do you have a bike rack?
Yeah.
She has a bike rack, and she has, I think she still has some motorcycle parking over there as well.
I thought so. So, okay, fine. The more of that kind of implementation we have for parking, the better. Good on you. You did good with that idea. We need to just spread that to other places. If we don't, I'm sorry. Let me ask one more question. I'll turn it over to you, David. See, Fairfax County, they have an interesting idea about outdoor seating. And the more outdoor seating you have, the more seat requirements are excluded from the parking calculations. So that's pretty cool. Because we're not going to make any more territory around this town. We got what we got. But these are a couple of ideas that sort of make it easier to use our parking. So having said that, I guess I'll ask if anybody has any questions about the documentation that surveyed what everybody else is doing around the country and the state.
Mr. Chairman, before we get too far into the conversation, can I make a couple of comments that perhaps would help?
Absolutely.
Maybe frame our conversation a little bit.
Thank you.
In December of last year, we had the council had quite a few folks come and make some comments to them about, matter of fact, about Peg's establishment, that she was undergoing some code enforcement issues because of parking. And the council took all that testimony in and certainly had a very kind ear and felt that there was something needed to be done. So they put a stay on all code enforcement actions related to parking for bars and restaurants. And at that same meeting, they tasked the board to say, hey, make us some recommendations on these policies. And I'm not going to go too deep into that, but Mr. Chairman has talked a little bit about that as well. But I think that I want to kind of make it a simple approach. I think the first decision that really needs to be made is, A, are the standards sufficient for what we have today? Does there need to be any changes? That's really the first decision. If the answer is no, then it's a quick discussion. If the answer is we like our standards, then we can call it an evening and move on to the next item. If the answer is yes, we think or no, they're not sufficient, we need to take a look at what we have. I think what we've done is we've gone through and looked at some other communities, how they've skinned the cat, so to speak. And there's a lot of very creative ways that different communities do that. And I think Mr. Chairman has mentioned a few of them about bike racks, outdoor seating. They look at different things such as the square footage or number of seats or things like that. But should the board decide that we do need to make some changes, we're suggesting we've included in our agenda packet some things that could be considered as part of the discussions and the deliberations. Staff's not here to say whether the parking today the standards are adequate or not. That's really the board's responsibility. But should you decide they're not adequate, we've thrown out some ideas for you. And if the board has any additional ideas, we'd certainly be interested in hearing those. But and I do want to cover something just very briefly, and it's on it's on page 2 of 3 on the agenda cover. And we put together a couple of just considerations for
Wait
the
a minute,
board to
let's-
keep in
let's
mind.
get where you are.
I'm on the agenda cover for the off-street parking item. If you find page 1 of that.
So I'm back here to restaurant parking survey.
Okay,
survey.
yeah, go
Attachment.
forward a little bit to the agenda cover itself. And what I mean by that is this page with the
Yeah,
city
yeah.
logo on it.
I got what I got. I may not have what you're referring to.
2 of 3.
Okay, so if you go to 2 of 3, and you'll see some paragraphs there. They're labeled 1, 2, and 3, and then 1, 2, and 3. I just want to cover those really quickly. At the top of the page, 1, 2, and 3, are some items on perhaps why we should keep the existing standards. And just briefly, I want to run through each of those. I think paragraph 1 really talks about we don't have a lot of issues with our parking standards. I've been aware of 3 now, and you guys have probably been very aware of them as well. Is back maybe several years ago, Preacher's Bar, just north of here. They had some parking issues because they were expanding the restaurant and bar into some additional bays in that strip center.
Yep.
And what happened was they didn't adequately provide the necessary parking.
Yeah.
And it became a huge issue. And the owner had to do some land swapping with the owner of the hotel behind them. And that was the way he was able to address that. So today, those properties and those businesses all meet the current parking requirements. The second issue that we've had is the Southern Charm Restaurant, if you're familiar with that. That's up here on Astronaut on the west side of the road. In a little strip center, it's back with edible arrangements. It's kind of back off of the street. We had some issues with that too. Same thing happened there. The restaurant, Southern Charm, continued to expand. They took over several bays, and there just wasn't enough parking to keep up with it. So the owner of the property had to reconfigure the parcel, and they did some creative things, and they got the parking that they needed. But anyways, those are some. So my point seems to be working for most uses, the current parking standards. I'm only aware of a couple of problems that we've had. The other issue I want the board to keep in mind is that we're a peculiar city. And what I mean by that is we're a very linear city. As we've been discussing a little bit this evening, we don't have a downtown. We've been talking about Cocoa Village. That is a very walkable, bikeable area. We really don't have a place like that right now. I think we all would like to have that, but we currently don't. And so what we have is a very linear, automobile-centric city. It's difficult to walk from one place to another like you can in Cocoa Village. So that's just something.
But the overlay is an attempt
Yes, sir.
to create a Cape Canaveral version of the Cocoa
Agreed.
solution.
Completely agree with that. Yes, sir. And the last thing I want to mention on paragraph 3 at the top is that there are some provisions in the code that allow for some flexibility with our current parking ratios. If you put in compact parking spaces, if you put in motorcycle parking spaces, if you put in pervious pavement, there's language in the code that we can reduce those parking ratio requirements. So there's point here being is that there is a small degree of flexibility in the code right now. Now, the three reasons that we've included in the agenda cover to take a look at maybe adopting new parking requirements is decreasing the number of parking spaces also decreases environmental impacts. When you have a huge parking lot, big surface parking lot, there's a lot of stormwater runoff on those, and typically they ultimately end up in the lagoon in Cape Canaveral they end up in the lagoon. So they're not environmentally great. Expansive parking areas just aren't. Number 2, with reduced parking standards comes opportunity for establishing bars and restaurants on smaller parcels, which opens up additional properties. In order to meet the current parking ratios, you have to have a certain size piece of property. And a perfect example is Ellie Mae's. In that it's a, I don't want to get into the details there, but the current parking ratios require a certain amount of parking. In order to meet that ratio, you have to have a certain size property, and they're larger, generally larger. The last item there in 3, the cost of constructing and maintaining a parking lot would be greatly reduced. And they're fairly expensive to build and maintain. So if the more, as we reduce our parking requirements, parking lots get smaller, and the cost associated with parking lots goes away, or is reduced as well.
And help me over a little hump here. So you got a business that is very successful.
Mhm.
People want to go to it, enjoy being there,
Mhm.
drive in. You get over parking. Reducing the parking requirement, where do those cars go? What happens to that? Because you want to keep your customer base.
That's a very fair and it's a very good question. And I think what we're suggesting as staff is that there should be some locational criteria for businesses that are eligible for a reduction in parking. It may not make sense to allow a reduction in parking that properties are accessed by A1A or some of the larger roads in the city, just because they're dependent on automobiles, like Southern Charm and Preacher's Bar. There may be some walking back and forth from the hotels, but most of their patrons come via car. Sorry, Peg, I'm going to use you as an example a lot tonight. Whereas Ellie Mae's.
It's a good example.
Yeah, it is. Ellie Mae's is really not that visible from North Atlantic. It doesn't, there seems to be a lot of bike walking folks go there.
It's more a neighborhood.
It's more of a neighborhood,
Customer
and
base.
if you look at the proposed locational criteria, that we're suggesting perhaps a reduction in parking would be appropriate, those locational criteria are kind of speaking to more of a neighborhood bar or restaurant. Not out on Astronaut or North Atlantic, but more
So-
tucked back into the,
So if we reduce the parking requirement at Ellie Mae's, what does that do? You just reduce the number of parking spaces or what? How's that work?
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, that would be the effect of it. I mean, right now, what we require is for every 3 seats you have in your restaurant or bar, you have to have 1 parking space. So
So we can make that every 10 seats in one space.
whatever the board would like to do, we've made some
Something like that.
suggestions. But yes, I mean, it would be that, and therefore the parking requirements would be reduced.
Yeah.
But also with the understanding that there needs to be some justification and rationale for doing that. And what we've done is we feel through the locational criteria, the rationale is there because it's not so auto-driven, auto-centric in certain locations in the city. So
Go on.
I think that was the only thing I wanted to mention. We do suggest some criteria that we've included in the agenda cover. There's 4 of them there. That is, access must be from a 2-lane public road. That would prohibit any reduced parking requirements from North Atlantic, some of the larger Astronaut.
So, wait, I'm having trouble with that.
Okay.
I'm not doing anything with that.
Okay.
Access should be limited to a 2-lane public road.
What we're saying there is if you have access from a 2-lane road, more than likely it's going to be more of a neighborhood setting. That would be off of any of our presidential streets.
Okay.
Whereas a 3 or 4-lane road is going to be more of our main thoroughfares,
Okay.
which may not warrant a reduction in parking requirements.
Could I ask a question? Cocoa Beach, before they built the large parking facility down there, there's numerous little places. When we would go there, we would take an Uber. What was Cocoa Beach's stand on that? Because they certainly didn't have parking.
I'm not, these are going to be just my personal observations. I haven't
That's
looked at.
fine. You know more than I do.
I haven't, but no, just given my experience in what I'll call kind of a downtown Cocoa Beach, kind of centered around some of the bars and those areas, there is more public parking available. There's a number of public lots that are available, paid public lots that are available, that are within walking distance of a lot of the bars and the beach. So the city of Cape Canaveral, we really don't have that. We don't have public parking lots. There was also street parking in Cocoa Beach.
Yes,
we did-
there was,
we-
but you really couldn't count on going down there on a Saturday night and finding a parking spot. And I know they have more parking than we do, but if people, went into one of the closed businesses on A1A, they could park there too. And in essence, I think a lot of that went on in Cocoa Beach.
Yeah. Well,
Mr. Chairman, can I chime in?
Surely.
I guess because I was pretty vocal on this in July. I didn't get the A1A because I identified 4 bars, restaurants that have A1A frontage, and they don't have enough parking. So I think that restriction for an A1A frontage is not good for the city. There's a lot of residential behind all of those that people walk. I know all of these establishments also have bicycle racks and so forth. At the last meeting, I brought up 2 options. I'm an advocate of either eliminating the mins for restaurants and bars or make the minimums maximums like Nashville and Boston and San Diego. Now, there's several websites that I have looked at. I can go into more. There's a map. There's like 1,400 cities in the United States that have eliminated minimum parking, either in certain areas or through the whole city. There's 11 in Florida that eliminated it in the Center district, and Gainesville actually did it citywide. So it is a jump of faith. There was actually a place in Idaho that basically was a town, Sandpoint, Idaho. It's a resort town, less than 10,000 residents, very similar to us. The attraction is the beaches and so forth. And they did away with parking minimums in downtown in 2009. And 9 years later,
What does that mean? They can park anywhere they want to without.
it means that
without penalty?
there's not an ordinance specifying 3 parking spaces to 1 seat, or 3 seats to 1 parking
So in
space.
other words, first come, first serve, and that's the parking.
That was it, and it's letting people, and then this town reduced its minimums citywide, so it's a new trend.
Yeah.
I think that it has brought, and I can quote people's names and all that stuff that you can call them, but I mean, even the city council of this town, I mean, he's watched it over the years, and it seems to be working. So I think it's a similar.
I agree with what Susan's saying. There is a big movement in municipal governments throughout the country to basically doing away with parking, perhaps in certain areas. As we've been talking, I actually I worked in a city for 10 years that we did away with parking in the downtown area. However, in conjunction with that, the city came in and built a parking garage to address a lot of the parking needs. I think that is something that needs to be looked at closely, is doing away with parking requirements. I think that's well, I think
This
that's.
is only
it
restaurant
works.
bars.
Yeah,
right?
it works. Yes. So, yeah, those are all very good points.
Well, let's think way out of the box. So in order to help out Ellie Mae, if they could somehow utilize all that parking across the street at the bank, there's not much of that parking used. I don't know how you'd facilitate that, but that's just some parking. It's available, it's there, it's parking, and it's not used. And then you go down the road a little piece, and you get across from, is it Slide In? A very successful business there. You got all that parking over there across the street from Slide In, and it's south of Center. That's never full. In other words, if you let your mind travel around town and find these open parking lots that are not full much, how do you facilitate the use of them for businesses that need them?
Yeah, we got to be careful with that for several reasons.
I get it.
The first is from a public safety standpoint.
Yeah, crossing the road.
You want people having a couple of beverages and then making a dash across
Yeah.
the street, especially North Atlantic or Astronaut. So,
Well,
so we
like I
got to.
said, that was out of the box.
Yeah, no, but it's good. I mean, our code actually allows for off-site parking up to 500 feet if you can come up with a parking agreement. So that's good thinking. It is in the code, but you know, to a degree, these communities that are doing away with these parking requirements, they're basically saying we're going to let the market take care of itself. You know, these owners and operators of these bars and restaurants or whatever retail shops, they're going to, you know, they're going to have to find ways to get people into their businesses. If there's not having a parking spot out in front of their business may dissuade a certain group of people. But I think the point is, it seems to be catching on and it appears to be working. But whether that's appropriate for Cape Canaveral or not, that's a decision this board's going to have to
So
wrestle with.
if we alleviate minimum parking and let the customers and the businesses sort it out for themselves, that seems to be successful around the country.
Well, I mean, yes, it's a growing trend, so I guess in that sense it's successful. But I just want to caution the board that, you know, we're not Cocoa Village, and we're not some of these larger cities that have the ability to go in and put in parking garages or have on-street parking, or, you know, we just need to be sensitive to that. We're who we are, and we need to always keep that in mind.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a recommendation? We have Ms. Schaller, am I saying that correct? The owner of Ellie Mae sitting out there. I would like to hear from her and other people in her situation, what she sees as the problem and what could be a solution.
Good.
Would you be willing to do that?
Would you like to come forward and have a conversation with us? Tell us your name again for the tape machine.
Thank you. Peg Schaller.
Okay.
I live in Cape Canaveral, and I own and operate Ellie Mae's Tiki Bar, 116 Jackson Avenue in Cape Canaveral. So there's so many great points being brought up, and I don't see any one person or any organization saying, hey, let's put this business out of business, or let's even pick favorites. Hey, I want this customer to succeed, I want this customer to fail. I don't view any of this conversation as that. But to your point, Chairman, the difference is, so we currently have about 200 seats in our restaurant. Okay. I was cited with a code violation saying that I needed to remove all but 36 seats because per the current parking minimums, I was only allowed 3 chairs for every 1 parking space. And even though maybe those parking spaces were not calculated correctly, it still ended up with maybe 40 to 50 seats, which would reduce the amount of customers I could have by 75%. So to your point, where are these customers? Because they have a stay on that. I still have the same 200 seats. I still have the same 20 plus or minus parking spaces. How am I able to fill my restaurant without any parking? And that is super clear for me. It's walking, biking, Ubering, and public transport. So I do have folks that will come and say, we wanted to come have dinner with you Friday night, but we couldn't find a spot, we had to go. And that is something that the market should bear. That should be the responsibility of the business owner to say, hey, I'm going to take a chance that I've got enough people willing to either Uber or Lyft or rideshare or carpool into my place. And there's enough people that are choosing to walk or ride their bicycles. And it's been successful. I mean, we are going on our 4th year, and we are still able to fill 200 seats, plus or minus, with our limited parking. We have had some runoff that's, people have parked here and there, and we've done some sharing of other parking facilities, and that's something that's certainly recognizable. But my thought is, if somebody parks in a spot that's illegal or that's not, then they should be ticketed. And if that is a public safety hazard, they should be towed. But the parking mandate should not happen by a city level. That should happen on a market level, whatever the market can bear. Now we're looking at the idea of creating a downtown and mixed use zones. Those will all be dependent upon parking. You will not be able to have an assortment of restaurants with apartments and whatnot above. Whether or not that's your vision or not your vision, you will not be able to have that because Cape Canaveral does not have any parking for that. So a vision of being able to create a downtown will not be able to become fruition. You will not be able to visualize that dream if you continue with the same 3 seats per parking space. So you've got to get it. I understand, and I really appreciate the fact that this is geared towards restaurants and bars, and that this is geared towards trying to be a benefit, trying to be a partner with a small business that's trying to make a go in their city, and we've done so. But it really expands past me and past bars and restaurants and into what is the vision? What is your vision of the city? The vision statement says a walkable, bikeable community with multimodal abilities to move. Well, the number one thing that parking minimums do is they increase an asphalt space. They make it further apart for businesses. They have to have X number of space between their businesses in order to be able to accommodate the necessary parking, and in doing so, create an area that people have to drive to because of the distance between. It's a green space issue. It's an environmental issue. It's a housing issue. These are all, there are 7 new studies that show all of the things that I'm speaking about here, and it's more than can Ellie Mays operate without having parking spaces. This is a big issue. This is a big issue. And although I greatly appreciate everybody's interest in helping my little business succeed, and I'm absolutely not minimizing that support. It's truly, truly appreciated. But I want the board to take a look at where do you want your city to go, and where do these parking minimums fit into that? And is it a situation to where we just allow the market to bear? So it's my responsibility. frequently have people say, tried to come in and couldn't get their peg because there wasn't any parking. And then I have other people that say, hey, we couldn't find any parking, so I got with you, with this person, with that person, with that person, and we all carpooled in. Or hey, we just decided to take a $5 Uber. Or guess what? We walked, which are all safety and environmentally focused. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Do you have any questions for me? I'm not a great public speaker, but I'm happy to answer anybody's questions.
You are a fine public speaker. That's a lot for us to take in, and we have been struggling with those ideas for some time. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we need to make a decision tonight. We're on a journey here to try to put things together and explore ideas. So I guess the thing that occurs to me is for David and Kyle and the rest of the staff to take all these ideas that we've heard tonight, put them together and see what the best ones are, and we'll talk about them again. If you're not there, you keep working. Go ahead, David, you got a comment.
Can I ask you a question, Peg?
Yes, sir.
Your parking problems, or your, however you want to call it, is it determined by hours? Do you need more parking at night than you do at lunchtime? Or?
I would say historically, because we offer some more arts in the evening. You know, we have music, we have wine tastings, we do a
Trivia?
trivia, yeah, which is super fun. And then we have like a murder mystery night, or because the entertainment, if you would, is primarily in the evening, I would say yes, there's a bigger demand in the evening than there is during the day. But slowly but surely, this little place on Jackson Avenue, which did not have a great reputation, is now developing a really good reputation for a restaurant and for a spot for lunch, and we're becoming more and more busy during our lunch hour as well.
All right.
So I do understand that, and if I can, Mr. Chairperson, I 100% appreciate your willingness to gnaw this over and to come up with the right solution to this problem. But if I may, so Ellie Mays is under a stay, if you would, of not enforcing this parking. And this stay has been in place, and Mr. Dickey, you'll have to help me with the exact number, but I would say we're going on 365, give or take, days. And the no decision is also very detrimental to me. I understand there may be some possibilities in the future for buying the building, or there's things that I would like to do as far as making a further investment, upgrade, and I'm simply unable to, because if this board and if city council determines that there is no need to change parking and the stay is now released, meaning I could then be charged $250 a day or remove 36 to 50 seats, then not only am I out of business, I've invested additional funds that I will no longer be able to recuperate. So I'm asking for some urgency in this matter so that I can make a reasonable business decision. I don't know that anybody would be willing to invest further money into a place, not knowing the outcome on whether or not the parking is going to get resolved or not resolved. So I appreciate very much so your ability to, and your patience in reviewing everything and wanting to get it right. And I hesitate to even say, but I really, my hands are semi-tied, and they've been tied now for almost a year. And I really want to be able to have all the facts in front of me before I make a decision on what's the best way to proceed with the business.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
John, do you have something else?
I do. Maybe a recommendation that the board could make would be to increase the stay or however we could do that, until, because obviously the board wants to take the time to evaluate this and, you know, that kind of thing. And it's not her fault we want to do that. I don't think she should be penalized for that. So one of the things that we might consider as a way to increase her stay, but that doesn't solve your problem. What you're looking for is a solution so that you can make decisions, and I understand that.
Yes, sir.
I haven't heard anybody say anything about Cape Canaveral having the willingness to provide public parking. And that's why I was asking about hours, because we have, for example, the library closes, for example, the bank closes, for example, that kind of thing. And maybe arrangements or considerations could be made that way to help. And I'm not talking, I mean, one of my favorite places, but I'm not talking about just Alley Mays. I'm talking about all these small businesses. I've always been the proponent of the small business as opposed to these food carts that come in, food trucks that come in from Orlando, I'd like to see the city work to try to help these folks. And I'm not saying that we don't. But I'm just wondering, maybe you have considered all those things and I'm just not aware of it. But I'm just wondering if there's some other things that the city can think of to help these small businesses.
Yeah, a couple responses. The first is the stay will continue as long as up and until the council makes any decisions. So I don't think we have to board or has to worry about the stay continuing. That'll go on for as long as needed.
Okay.
Regarding the city's role in providing parking, I have personally looked at a number of things to do, and there's ways. We have a CRA, our Community Redevelopment Agency, and that's one of the primary purposes of a CRA is to assemble property and to provide things like public parking lots.
Has there been any conversation under the CRA venue to go and buy lots, empty lot, or whatever, buy lots down the town? We're a linear town, so one parking garage isn't gonna do it for the whole town.
Right.
You need them spaced down. Is there any way you could buy lots and then allow people to park on those city-owned?
Yeah, that is one of the primary purposes of a CRA, is to do projects like that. So, and I have talked to the city manager about that. We actually, I think it was at the last strategic planning retreat that the council had, the city council. This actually came up about the city assembling properties and doing projects like this. It didn't seem to get a whole lot of traction with the entire council. There was one or two council members that were really interested in doing that.
If it's CRA money, it's just a matter of applying the funding and doing it. It's no skin off the council's back.
Well, it's competing priorities. What do you want to spend those CRA dollars on?
Right, I get it.
So, but I think there are opportunities for the CRA to purchase a property here and there and turn it into some other use, parking perhaps, or others. So yes, all that is there. It's just a matter of, is it a priority?
Yeah.
I can't answer that question.
I've got one question, but we still owe Susan the airtime here. You've got a question you
The
had
only
while
thing
ago.
I want to say is this is not just an Ellie Mae's issue. She's very vocal, and she's been here, and it got spurned off over a year ago. There's other local bars that are neighborhood bars that people walk to and back to, that if we do nothing. So I vote that we do need to address it. You had two questions. I think the answer is yes, we need to address it. I put out a couple of options. We talked about 3 or 4 other ones at the last meeting. But if we say, okay, she's never gonna get enough parking spaces to fit what we want, but we also have to look at all the other bars and restaurants around that don't have enough parking right now either. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to try to draft regulations for a specific piece of property or a specific business. You can't do it. It's just impossible. So I think we have to come up with some kind of a logical,
But I got a question to ask Peg. So you say an indefinite stay is not good for you. You need something so you can make business decisions. Tell us what would be the best outcome for you? Indefinite stay, no parking enforcement? I mean, what is it that works for you?
Well, what would work for me, of course, would be to eliminate parking minimums and let the market bear how many guests are willing to come based on the number of parking spaces that are there. But what is ultimately best for me and best for my business is the success of Cape Canaveral as a whole. That is what's ultimately best for me. What's going to help me in this vacuum is just eliminating parking restrictions and changing those parking restrictions. That's what ultimately is, but that's a very small vacuum. What is best for me in the next 10, 20 years is for Cape Canaveral to be able to envision and realize the true vision of Cape Canaveral, the presidential streets plan and things like that, and to have that be actualized. And in order to do that, you'll have to make a parking change. There's just simply not enough ground.
There's not enough parking space all over the world.
Right. I mean, and then people, different countries have handled things in different ways. I mean, Amsterdam and the Netherlands, they went way the opposite direction. They made parking maximums, and now they have one of the healthiest nations in the world because people have to bike and have to walk where they're going to go. And I'm not saying that we need to turn Cape Canaveral into Amsterdam in a hot second, but what is the projection? What is the goal? Where do you want to be? Because where I want to be is included in the city's success. It's not okay just for me to be successful, because eventually that flame will wear out. It's important for me to be a part of a community that is overall successful.
So the first thing that would help small businesses, bars, restaurants, is to eliminate the parking minimum.
That's correct. And to let the market bear. If people come to my restaurant and they choose to drive right on by because I don't have a parking space available, then that's okay. Because they have figured out how to get to me.
Yep.
And I would like for the opportunity for them to continue to figure that out.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we have been at this for a long time. This is not the first time we've discussed this. We talk about the same things over and over. We are encouraging small businesses to come to Cape Canaveral, and then we penalize them because they don't have enough parking spaces. We've said multiple times, we're not growing any more land here. But why are we continuing now to hold up her life? Because we haven't made a decision. I'm ready to make a decision. I don't need more time.
Which is?
I think we should get rid of the parking requirements.
Yeah, that's the way I'm starting to feel, and I believe it's just a beginning.
I think it is a beginning. I don't think it's the end of it. I think we need to talk about parking garages and those kind of things in the future.
Yep.
But at the same time, we're penalizing our businesses with this ordinance that we're not going to be able to meet.
Agreed.
I'd like to make one comment. On a very regular basis, we're being contacted by businesses, eateries and bars, mostly, on wanting to come to Cape Canaveral. I've had a couple of microbreweries contact me in the last month wanting to come to Cape Canaveral because of who we are and what we're doing and where we are and our proximity to certain locations. A very exciting place to be. And I don't want to lose that synergy and that excitement by strangling.
And I agree with you, and then I agree with what he said a while ago. Now is the time to act. As with that port growing the way it's growing, I don't want them to be off of A1A. I think it's great if we have neighborhood pubs. No problem with that at all. But if you want to attract the traffic coming down A1A, they're just going to go down to Cocoa Beach. Let's stop them here in Cape Canaveral.
Well, okay, so I'm starting to see a consensus converge here that we could make one recommendation to council tonight while we continue to work this problem. What do you think, David? Is that, you think the council would,
I think the council wants to hear what the board has to say, whatever that is. I know there is a sense of urgency, at least on our city manager's point of view. He wants to get this put to bed ASAP. It's been 10 months since the council assigned this task to staff and to the board.
well, why haven't you put it on our agenda more often?
I thought I had been putting it on quite a bit.
Forget I said that.
But I'm not, this is a big policy issue. Doing away with parking requirements, and I'm not suggesting we don't do that at all. I'm just saying, it's a big policy decision.
Yeah,
And
but we can try it.
certainly,
We can
we
try it.
certainly can. If that's what the board would like to do, that would certainly be a recommendation that you could make to the council. And I agree. I think it's difficult to just take this one issue in a vacuum, because there's so many other things that are going to be affected by this.
Yeah, this is going to be one recommendation. We
yeah.
ain't done yet.
And could I ask if this recommendation, assuming this what the recommendation from the board is going to be to do away with parking requirements, would it be limited to bars and restaurants, or are you thinking that's some clarification I would like to get from the board?
Well, bars and restaurants are the immediate problem. I'm not hearing any noise from the other commercial sectors, but didn't mean it's not there.
That's what this agenda item is too. It's bars and restaurants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's be the trendsetters. Let's do something here.
Agree.
Yeah, we're going to, just a second, we want to hear from everybody. Sir, come to the microphone, and we'll include you in.
For the vision to occur, typically there needs to be synergy. To get that synergy, someone has to step out. This type of thing is the first step, but it also lends the opportunity to these other desires for developers to come in. A developer, believe me, he knows he's going to have to ante up. The city has the opportunity, if you do this and it creates a little bit of motion, they have the opportunity to look at the spaces that exist, the vacant lots. Maybe there's some sort of mass transportation that occurs on a smaller scale, hop-on, hop-offs, which revitalize small areas. You don't have to walk everywhere. We could possibly do that. That might be a money generator. But these types of steps, they can't just happen and then 10 months later another. I think it's time to start the synergy, get the ball moving, and then you can adjust. Then you can jockey around. But the city does have opportunities to do things. And developers, if they're going to come in here and do these big projects, they've already got it in their wallet to do some traffic mitigation. Mm-hmm. They know it. We take advantage of it. And when they come in, you want this? We need this. And that's how the game's played. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's unfair. I think it's just the way it works. And we just need to know that that's going to be one of our demands. When a developer comes in and he wants to do a big project, you either got a little parking lot there or you've got to do something else. You've got to expand this, you've got to do sidewalks, you've got to do off-street parking.
Or you put your building on top of a parking garage.
If that occurs, that'll happen somewhere, or at least part of a big project here, that will happen.
Yeah.
That's the only way their numbers are gonna work. But you've also got to look at height restrictions. We're stumping ourselves right off the bat because of the height restrictions. Leave it to just that one code, that'll stop it all. We're gonna have to think about that.
Yeah, and the thing that comes to mind is you might, if you're gonna ask somebody to build their own parking garage underneath the building or out back, make sure that height for the parking garage doesn't penalize the height of the building. I mean, that's an idea.
Yeah,
It's just an
there's
idea.
things that can occur
we-
within a multi-use, mixed-use property where everyone antes up to get that parking garage in there.
Yeah.
And it can be hidden within the space, not even be seen. There's a lot of ways of doing that in the least attractive area of a big project to allow for the rest of the project to be dynamic. So I think the step is to take the step, start things to happen.
Well, we can certainly take a step tonight. Thank you. Dr. Miller, did you have some more? Did you have anything else?
No, I just think the momentum is going and we need to keep going with it.
Okay. Stephen, do you have anything?
You know, bikeability, Uber, walking, that's the way people get around. And that's the trend, and that's just gonna keep on going on.
Okay, how about you, Susan? Anything else?
I've said enough, I think. Thank you.
No, it was appreciated. You never say too much. You're not penalized for that. Okay, how about you, John, any more?
Nope, I've said enough.
No, I think that's kind of the way to go. I grew up in a very large city, and there was no parking restrictions. If you parked illegally, you were ticketed. And so, and we're all grown-ups, and that's why I think, yeah, as I said, if you get together, we'd have one person drive 5 of us. Or, back then, we took cabs, back in the day, and now it's Uber. It can work.
Okay, now, the big question, how do we craft this motion?
Well, we're going to certainly have to get Anthony involved in this, but I think I don't know what the board's recommendation is going to be, but I think if it's...
Okay, let's assume the consensus says we'd like to ask the council to no longer enforce parking regulations for bars and restaurants.
How about, so how about rather than enforce parking regulations,
Do away
just
with it.
eliminate?
Eliminate.
Eliminate parking
Eliminate.
minimums.
Just
Yeah,
one
that's okay.
question. Now, a lot of this was censored around places that were not on A1A. Are you still going to exclude them, or should they be included?
Well, that's the board's decision. I mean, we provided a kind of a two-tiered approach. It would be
Yeah.
only, the reduction in parking would only be allowed for certain businesses that did not have frontage on A1A.
I almost think we have to do all,
Well, I think the reality is we don't have that crystal ball. We make a recommendation, we learn from what happens as a result, and then we adjust and modify.
So for tonight, number one recommendation on parking, more to come, because we're not through working this problem. But shall we have a motion to ask the council to abolish parking regulations for bars and restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it's the board's decision, and Anthony can help us craft the language, but I think it's as simple as the board recommends that the city council eliminate parking requirements for bars and restaurants throughout the city.
Mr. Chairman?
It's that simple, but.
I'd like to
unless
make a
Anthony
motion.
has any comments?
Eliminate, repeal. That's the gist.
Eliminate? Okay, John, you look like you're cocked and ready.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to city council that we eliminate or repeal parking regulations for, eliminate for
Should we say
parking.
parking minimums, just so we're clear on the, so it's the number, not necessarily all the regulations that go along with it?
Okay,
Not to be
yeah.
nitpicky, but.
All right, minimums. for bars and
For
restaurants.
off-street parking for bars and restaurants.
I second that.
All right, let's be a little clearer on that. I heard a couple of things come in there and make sure Renee gets.
Can you read something back to us?
Yeah, let's craft this motion. clean.
Anthony?
Say it for us, Anthony, and you heard what we were
Are
saying.
you paying attention?
So if you don't choose to, I will.
My understanding is that the board wishes to make a recommendation to the city council to eliminate the minimum off-street parking requirements for bars and restaurants
Correct.
in all zoning districts, right?
Yes.
That gets it, that does it. We want a clean motion, and that ought to give the council a clear thing to vote on. Okay, John, we're going to have your motion to recommend the council eliminate.
What Anthony said, yeah.
What
Yeah,
did you
but
say?
Anthony, did you get what Anthony said then, Renee? You'll have to listen to the tape.
Yes.
All right,
We need a second.
I second it.
Seconded.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've got, everybody wants a second. We got seconds.
He seconded first.
You beat us to it.
He's gonna third it.
He was right there.
Now we need
Okay,
to
it
call
was
roll,
seconded
yes.
by Dr. Miller.
Motion of what he said.
That's right.
Motion made by John Price and seconded by Dr. Miller to eliminate off-street parking regulations. And I'm going to ask Renee to call a question.
Mr. Russell?
4.
Mr. Price?
For the motion.
Ms. Denny?
For the motion.
Ms. Jenicoor?
For the motion?
Dr. Miller?
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud?
For the motion.
Don't forget to include, for bars and restaurants is what this include. Okay. We're done with that. And this is only the first
Yes, more to come.
Yeah, we can
salvo.
discuss more in general.
Yeah, I want to hear this, I want this thing on the agenda for next time, so we don't drop the ball.
Understood.
All right, here we are. We did,
I don't know if the board realizes what a big deal that was or is. It's going to change
It
a lot
is.
of things.
Oh, no, it is
No.
a big deal, yeah.
It was that's a significant
well,
decision.
we're
But
going to try it.
we're only making the recommendation, right? That's-
But we're going to, yeah, maybe the council doesn't want to buy
The
it.
city council then, yeah.
Then Peg can go beat the council up. No, really, we're only 2 square mile town. We are literally governed by our neighbors. We elect our neighbors, they govern us, and we work as neighbors on this board. We're all neighbors, so we're all in this together. So that's what we neighbors recommend to our council neighbors. And we'll try it on, you gonna get that on the agenda next time, or what?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what we'll do, how that, but yes, it'll.
Well, you gotta work with the ordinance or the
Yeah, we'll work with
recommendation.
Anthony, but it'll go to the October council,
Yeah.
meeting, so we'll keep you informed on, it's probably gonna be a discussion item on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
They don't wanna discuss it before they warm up, like we did.
Yes, sir.
All right, and then we got our next item that's kept everybody waiting. I apologize for all you guys to waiting on the hotel item, but we hadn't all that bone.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go
can I
ahead.
recommend a 5-minute break?
So moved, and so 5-minute break. Hilton Garden Inn. Thank you. Hilton Garden, what?
Thank you.
Yeah.
that's a strong town's principle. I told my girl, I'm like, I'll be home pretty soon. Me too. I know. I should never say that. Shouldn't. Yeah. Or an FYI.
Yes, definitely, they'll be, and the fire marshal.
And the farm, yeah, because there are a lot of restrictions.
Yes, yes. We may not go over that.
We got everybody?
Yes, sir.
Of the last item.
Board will be back in session. And our next agenda item is the Hilton Garden Inn site plan approval. Dave, lead us through it.
Yes, thank you. Will you hit the next slide? Yeah, so just some general info about this one. This is owned by McKibben Hotel Group. The engineer was Allen Engineering. They're here tonight. It's C2 zoning as well as C2 future land use. It's in the A1A Economic Overlay District and the CRA. It was approved by the CAB back in January with conditions that included a landscape buffer, a 5-foot sidewalk along Imperial Boulevard, benches and seating on the east and south sides. The building footprint matches the concept site plan, and then they wanted pleasant exterior lighting, essentially just meeting the city's lighting code, no uplighting or anything like that. Can you do that? I don't know if I have another slide on this. I think that's really, yeah, can go back. And the applicant is here. If you have any specific questions or if there's anything you'd like me to go into in some more detail, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I will say, Mr. Chairman, that we have reviewed the application. It is consistent with the applicable codes and both in the zoning district as well as the overlay district. I want to bring your attention to the, on page 4 of 5 of this agenda item. Give everybody a second to get there. Agenda item, and then it says page 4 of 5. Okay. So it's just page in 4 or 5, yeah. One page in front of the map. I wanted to bring the attention to the board of, and this is a very important point, it's the final sentence in the body of the staff report. And it says in an email dated August 21, 2023, the city engineer stated that all comments have been addressed, therefore the site plan is ready for board consideration. And the comment I want to make is that site plan review is really very much a technical review. It's to make sure that a project is consistent with all of the city's technical specifications, such as landscaping and parking lots and water and sewer lines and drainage lines. So it's very much a technically driven approval process. And that's why that statement from the city engineer is really critical for the board's consideration. But we staff is recommending that the board recommend approval of the site plan for the Hilton Garden Inn Hotel and associated restaurant located at the site. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you for that staff report. Yeah, I always look for the city engineer's statement. Thank you. I always look for the city engineer's statement, and there's a lot of data in this pack, and I spent about 2 hours with it Saturday, and I had some iced tea nearby and a football game going on at the same time, so
Go Vols.
It worked well. But this is a lot of data. It's a very good, in other words, I looked through it carefully as I could. I did not see any warts. I could not find anything to really get it worried about. So having said that, to input as they wish. Anything?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We have the engineer here.
Well, I was going to ask Mike to come up afterward, but
Yeah.
good. Introduce you.
Allen Engineering, 106 Dixie Lane, Cocoa Beach.
How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing good. I get some curiosity about something in the design on this system here. And I see that your stormwater collection system is all an HDP type N12 perforated pipe.
Yes, we're going with an exfiltration system in order to reduce any kind of runoff or discharge off-site. We're actually having to go and excavate, I think it was 5 or 6 feet. 10 feet outside.
10 feet outside of it, yeah. I read the
to help
documents.
the permeability
Yeah.
of the system with a little bit of discharge out to the A1A at the end.
So my question is, and this is, to help educate me and maybe some people pick something up off of this, but why would you not, I'm looking at this design here, and you've got more than 7,000 linear feet of this 18-inch pipe involved in this design. Why would you have not gone with a storm water collection system like one that ADS does make, and another company that makes Coltech? We have these types of systems that were installed out at the port at Terminal 3. We've got it installed out at the ball field. And, I got to thinking, I went, 7,200 linear feet of this pipe you've got massive amount of trucks and storage. When those types of systems, you could bring in on a couple of flatbeds and you've got all the product that you need.
It's just preferential use. I mean, we've been designing these for over 60 years, and they've survived.
Yeah.
Not necessarily HDPE pipe, but a lot of corrugated metal back in the day, and they're still working and functioning properly. So it's just that it's what we've done in the past, and it's been successful for us. So that's why.
I didn't know if there was an issue with the weight of the fire truck and the ratings and stuff with that as to why you went with that pipe, but it's just something that y'all were comfortable with. My only concern with that type of design is I know with the storm chamber systems, they have feeder rows that are set up and designed for you to be able to clean them out. This type of perforated pipe in the ground for 10 years, and I know you got some weirs and stuff in there in your structures, but my concern is you can never get back into the ground to this stuff unless you start digging all the parking lots up. With the stormwater collection systems, you have flushing ports, you have inspection ports, blah, blah, to be able to get into there, and you would not with this type of system.
Well, I mean, we do have the inlets at the corners and then in the major, intake points. And
I looked at your structures.
So, I mean,
it's a good design. It's a good design.
I'm just going back to it's what we've done in the past, and it's always been successful for us, and that's kind of the way we stick with it.
All right. That was a major question I had about that, but I do want to make a statement about something else here. So this size of this hotel, height and everything, is going to eventually end up with a fire protection system in it, and it's going to have a fire pump because of the height and everything to it. I want to say this to the board. I want the city to hear this. NFPA 25 is what we use for the inspections of fire sprinkler systems throughout. And one of the requirements on fire sprinkler systems is an annual flow test of that fire pump. So let's just get hypothetical here for a minute. That facility there is probably going to get 1,000 GPM pump. And once a year, they've got to come in and run that pump at zero, a deadhead churn, 100% of its capacity, and then 150% capacity. So I've conducted many of these tests over the years. In 10 minutes, I can put 10,000 gallons of water on top of that exfiltration system out there. And that has to be done annually every year. It's a huge waste of water. But let me point something out to you. If you have a flow loop installed on that system in that fire pump room, you only have to flow that water on the ground once every third year. That prevents you from putting tens of thousands of gallons of water into the ground there if you have that flow loop installed on it. What does that take to do? 2 T's, 2 valves, and the flow meter. And that's all you need to incorporate in the design. I know you guys don't get involved in that because that's part of the
But we can certainly make the recommendation
fire
to
protection engineer. And I want to encourage the city, I want to encourage the engineers to do something like this because it is a real savings of water, and we're not wasting water, we're not dumping it in our rivers, we're not overflowing the exfiltration systems.
I mean, they'll have to apply for a fire line permit or fire protection
Yeah.
permit, and so, I mean, that's certainly a recommendation that we can make to staff, that be considered when they do that.
There's no way that any storm drains can collect that water efficiently without it getting out into the road and stuff.
Like you said, it's a waste of.
It's a waste of
Waste
water.
of clean
It really is. I just wanted to make that recommendation to the city. And
Yeah, we can pass that on to our fire department. They'll be the folks who do all that permitting. So, yeah, we can do that. If you have any like specs or something, if you could email them to me.
I could find specs, I could find photos, I
Yeah,
can
that'd be great.
pull design criteria from NFPA 13, just whatever it takes. But I'll be more than happy to assist with that information and stuff. Hey, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming up.
Listening.
You bet. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Miller, do you have anything? Susan?
No, I'm good.
John?
Well, one of the things that always excites me about a project like this is the revenue that the city realizes. Talking about the parks and recreation library, that kind of thing, the revenue that's generated from the construction of that is a wonderful thing. And certainly it's an added bonus. So thank you.
Yeah, I think, we've been also working closely with the adjacent property owner to kind of clean up Imperial there in the corner, so I think you'll be happy with the final results.
Don't knock down the brewery, okay?
No. We're trying to get a sidewalk connection to it.
That's a good idea.
Okay. I don't have any further additions or corrections or comments. So, David, do you have anything else?
No, sir.
Kyle?
Nope. I do want to bring up, they're doing a lot of permeable pavement. There's going to be some EV charging stations on the site. Some pretty cool stuff, so I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Permeable pavement is good stuff. All right. Do we have, are we ready for a motion to recommend approval?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of this project.
Is there a second?
I second the motion. Denny?
Thank you. And Renee, please call the roll for approval.
Mr. Russell?
4.
Mr. Price?
For the motion.
Ms. Denny?
For the motion.
Ms. Jenicoor?
For the motion.
Dr. Miller? Mr. Stroud?
For the motion.
Okay. We're done with that one. Thank you, Mike.
Very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Sorry we had to hold you so long. We should have put you on the front of the agenda, and we will.
Very interesting conversation.
Well, you learned a lot, huh? Well, this next one ought to be fun. Discuss allowing an exception to the current height requirements for certain uses. And I'll just let you lead us into that, David. It's about rooftop observation.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and speak on it a little bit. We have gotten, I want to say 3 or 4 inquiries just in the past few months from hotel developers, including the one here on Imperial, about some sort of observation, adding some sort of observation deck or in some cases a bar, but not always a bar, on the top of the 6th floor. And currently our code doesn't allow for that, because even if you were to say this isn't habitable space as defined by the building code, the ADA requires an elevator go up there. So that is habitable space that would go above the 65-foot height limit. So I really just wanted to bring this up as an FYI. We're still very early in the stages of even researching this. I did include a couple places that have done this around the county. Renee, if you could go 2 ahead. The first one is the Space Bar over in Titusville. I don't know if anyone's been here, but I believe it's on the 6th, on top of the 6th story.
6, yeah.
And I have a feeling, I think this is sort of exactly what people are envisioning when they say, when they ask us. And there's another one on the next slide, the Hotel Melby in Melbourne. This one is a little different because what they did was build into might even be the 7th floor, but there are rooms up here, and then they kind of carved out this edge to have a bar, which is a possibility under our code, but the way we require 150 rooms, sometimes it can be a little complicated logistically. So I just wanted to, bring it up and get your thoughts if you had any. And I mean, we're going to continue to do research, and we have spoken with the building official and fire chief, very, very preliminary, but just interested in having the conversation.
Yeah, right now our zoning code lists maybe 10 or 12 exceptions to height limitations. And so they're like rooftop equipment, like you'd find on a typical commercial, fans, antennas, belfries, solar panels. There's certain things that can go above whatever that particular zoning district's height limitation is. Say C1, it's 45 feet. So you can have those things extend past the 45 feet. So I think what we're doing is we're just asking what the board's initial kind of thoughts are on, would it be advisable or is it good policy to allow for these kind of uses on the rooftops of particularly hotels? I mean, obviously, these guys, the developers, the owners want to take advantage of the views to the north. which is understandable. I get that. It'd be a nice amenity for tourists, for our residents. But it's would require some policy change to our code. And we just wanted to get some feedback from the board that we would have to work through some Florida building code and some life safety, our fire code issues, with some occupancy requirements. But it's done elsewhere. We can do it if we have an interest. So just wanted to get some initial thoughts from the board on that and whether that would be something that we should move forward with at the staff level and bring something to you in the future.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Miller?
I see no problem with this. This is just the kind of thing that we need in this city. This is what the tourists are wanting when they come here. If you could stand on top of that and see the ocean, see the river, see the port, this is exactly what they want. And why let this one ordinance stop this from happening? Because that one in Melbourne is packed.
Yeah. And they're going to go there if we don't have it.
Exactly.
Stephen? Anything? You're mute on this?
Mute on this one.
Okay, Susan?
I think we should explore it. I don't know if I'm for it or against it now, but I think it would be pretty cool. I've been thinking about going over to Titusville, but it's hard for me to leave my backyard, you know?
I think it's a good idea, but, you know, if you allow it on existing hotel rooftops, there are lots of structural considerations, elevator considerations, safety, enclosure, all that stuff. In other words, a lot of structural engineering. And we don't have any requirements in place for that. We'd have to develop them.
Yeah, we'd have to rely what we have in the Florida building code and the fire code for currently. But that would be part of our discussion is what are some appropriate standards and requirements to put in place?
But to put it on an existing hotel is, that increases the height over and above, well, one more story is what it is. Unless they want to carve out a part of their rooftop and do all the structural things necessary to accommodate it. Anyway, there's that. And then new developers, if they want to have that, and they just incorporate it in their original building requirements, structural requirements, and it just becomes part of the build and through the regular approval process. My thoughts. How about you, John? Anything?
I'm all for it.
I think we should look at it. It really looks attractive, and let's see.
Okay, so the consensus is we'd like to hear more about it. Bring us something that we can chew on.
We will do that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Is there anything else to come before the board? Hearing none, we are adjourned.